coming-of-age films. They are an important part of the film genre. They explore the lives of teenagers and the growing pains they can experience while transitioning into adulthood. Coming-of-age films are very simple. They're about a younger person, typically a teenager, advancing mentally and physically into adulthood. It shows the growth of these characters and the battles they overcome to become that person they are at the end of the. These films typically take place in suburban areas, schools, or places along those sort of nature. This genre has been popular for quite some time and spans several decades, going back as far as the 50s with films such as Rebel Without a Cause, all the way to today with films like Booksmart. And because this genre has spanned such a long time, it has varied quite a bit throughout the years. There is also a variation when it comes to where the film originates. The way people experience life and growing up can vary quite a bit depending on where they're from and the culture they grow up with. Let's take The Virgin Suicides and Mustang for example. Both are films that are coming of age, and both deal with some similar topics. The Virgin Suicides is a film set in the 1970s Detroit about the life and eventual suicide of 5 girls. The first girl to commit suicide, and the one that causes this downward spiral, is Cecilia. After this, we mainly follow Lux, with the rest of the girls feeling more like background characters more than anything else. Lux continues to spiral, and eventually all the girls are locked away. This is when the boys, who have been narrating, begin to contact them via phone. They eventually make plans to meet up, but as the boys wait, they all kill themselves. Mustang, on the other hand, is a film set in 2015, which also follows 5 girls as they deal with the fallout of playing a game with a couple of boys. But unlike in the Virgin Suicides, we aren't following all 5 of the girls, we are mainly following Lale, the youngest of the sisters. The incident about the boys, along with other things such as sneaking out, lead to them being essentially locked in the house. And along with this, each of the sisters is being married away, so Lale is losing the people that she cares about. After 2 of them are married away and one of them kills herself, in a desperate attempt to save her final sister from marriage, she locked all of the family out, and her sister finally escape. So now what we have is a basic understanding of each film. Let's try and answer the question, to what extent do coming-of-age films differ in their representation of adolescence according to cultural context? Well, as I was saying a little bit ago, cultural context matters quite a bit. The setting, culture, all of the things in that vein have a huge effect on how we see and interpret the story as a whole. One example in this can be seen in The Girls. The girls of the Virgin Suicide, for a large majority of the film, all sort of blend into one character. This is partly because the story isn't so much about the girls themselves, but the trouble that they, as a group, went through, and how the suicide impacts the small-town community. The girls of Mustang, on the other hand, all feel separate, and that's because they need to for the story to make sense. 2 of the 5 girls are married away, and this causes Lolly to think about how unfair this is. She comes to this conclusion after seeing how her sisters are forced away and one kills herself. So the reason for them all feeling separate is because of the things going on, like arranged marriage, which isn't a thing really in the US. Another example of them being culturally different is the costuming. The clothing of the girls in the Virgin Suicides is very Western. It's sort of open, colorful. The clothing of a majority of the people in Mustang is much more reserved and much darker, more gray, brown, blacks, those sort of colors. The girls also wear more modern clothes, close to the ones of the Virgin Suicides inside their house, but outside is pretty much modest and reserved clothing only. The reason for this is because of the culture. What they show off to the world is very important, so they can't be wearing the clothes that they would wear inside or the clothes worn in the Virgin Suicides because it doesn't give off a message that the girls want to give off. It's not really the girls, but the grandmother who cares, and who doesn't want them to wear these clothes. The third and final example is the narrative structure. The narrative structure of Mustang is very basic. It follows a linear story with no flashbacks or forwards. It starts with a point A and goes straight on the path to point B. The fact is we grow up and learn with Lale. We see what happens through her point of view and how she deals and reacts with it. We see what happens and what makes her want to leave the situation that she's in. It's a real-time thing, whereas the Virgin Suicides is much different. It is narrated by a boy from the group of boys that contacts them, and instead of it being linear, it jumps between time. It changes how we see the story, and it's not so much growing with the girls, but more seeing how their experiences impacted the world around them. Cultural context is truly important when it comes to any film, but especially coming-of-age films. Why? Because coming-of-age films are meant to be relatable to teens of the time. And if an American teen sees Mustang, it isn't going to be as relatable compared to a Turkish teen watching the same film. And this goes to the same with Virgin Suicide. A Turkish teen is not going to get the same experience that one of a typical American teenager would get. But it's still going to have an impact on you, and it's still going to make you feel something. So no matter what the cultural context really is, we need to know how it affects how we interpret the world and see it how it truly is.